Welcome to our online Literary Agent Summit. Today I'm speaking with Laurie Chittenden of Tesler Literary Agency. So welcome, Laurie.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for having me.
So I'm trying to tailor these questions to the individual agent's background. And you were an acquisitions editor for several years. In fact, I think I figured out that you actually worked for 4 of the big 5 publishers.
Let me think here. Let me just sort of do that. That's probably true. S&S, let me think. Well, I actually started at Hyperion before Hyperion has sort of moved on, but that was part of Disney in the early days. So there's that. There's Simon & Schuster hardcover. There is Dutton, which is part of Penguin Random House now. There's Morrow, which is part of HarperCollins, and St. Martin's Press.
Which is part of Macmillan.
So that's 5, actually.
Okay, well, there we go. So tell us, first of all, why you decided to become an agent.
Well, after many years, I have to say, when I started in publishing, the first few books that I signed up as an acquisitions editor did not originally have an agent attached to them. They were a book called The Christmas Box by Richard Paul Evans, and that he had self-published originally, and then it had hit the Times list, and so then everybody, sort of wanted him, and I ended up getting to publish the book, which is fantastic. And then Jennifer Chiavarini's first book, The Quilter's Apprentice, and she's gone on to write many Quilter's Apprentice novels, all became bestsellers, and then she's been writing historical fiction, Mrs. Lincoln's Dressmaker, for instance. And I, over all this time, I kept thinking, I wonder what it would be like to be an agent. I wonder what it would be like to be an agent. And being a strong advocate for an author was always what I enjoyed most about being an editor, being the person in the trenches fighting for my authors, for the cover they wanted, for the end papers they wanted, for marketing dollars, for the attention of the sales reps. And as my career progressed, I finally found myself in a position where I was sort of no longer afraid to take that leap. And I just decided, I'm not getting any younger. It's something I've thought about for a long time, and now's the time to do it. And just, finally be a, pure advocate for the author on their side of the fence.
Well, I'm sure that your experience as an acquisitions editor inside all these major trade houses has really helped you as an agent.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of, I'm finding what's interesting is people who've been agents for a long time, they have a wonderful sense of how books go from A to Z. However, they don't quite have all of the sort of publishing inside of the house speak that goes on. For instance, even in terms of rejections, editors kind of have this, sort of language about what they're trying to convey when they pass on a book. And, people are constantly sort of saying, well, what do they mean by this? What do they mean by this? What do I need to change about my manuscript? And they'll get, if anybody's ever gotten reject letters, if you get 10, you get 10 different reject letters. They're always pointing out something different. There's usually not like a current, one set thing. And there's sort of a language in that can help people understand what could shift it into a much more marketable direction based on what editors are saying. And there's also, I know how to navigate sort of what is important to a publisher to emphasize when trying to advocate on behalf of my authors. I know what to emphasize, what to not emphasize, who I need to talk to in-house to make something happen. By having worked at a lot of houses, one of the great things is I have these relationships across the board. So it gives me a little bit of an edge. I can pick up the phone and call the head of sales, at Penguin or something and say, hey, what's going on? It's great to catch up with you. And I have this, book you guys are publishing, what's the latest? So, I can make some end runs.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Well, now you were also a bookseller.
Yes, I
Okay.
was.
And what did you learn about the industry when you were a bookseller?
Really books. I worked at what was a Rizzoli in Colonial Williamsburg that then became a Barnes and Noble. And it's where I first learned marketplace, I would say. It's actually where, for instance, when I was there, one of the biggest selling categories in the store were how-to books, crafting books, how-to books. And within that, quilting was the biggest best-selling category. So years later, when Jennifer Tavarini sent her manuscript, The Quilter's Apprentice, my way without an agent, at the time, I said, oh my gosh, here's this person who can really write, and it happens to tie into this area of the bookstore that there's a lot of people quilting, and a lot of people who quilt, I assume, are also readers. They're kind of like book clubs, and so that allowed me to see a marketplace that a lot of other people, sort of the folks that had been in publishing and sitting in the New York trade, their publishing towers had not really had firsthand experience with. And, it's where I first learned the importance of covers and really how to market and display books.
Uh-huh. Right. Just watching how people shop, I think would be really helpful. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. In fact. Yeah.
So I'm an author, and I'm reading these wonderful websites of all you agents, or I'm meeting you at conferences. What should I be looking for in an agent? How can I tell if an agent is going to be right for me or not?
I think it's where you kind of have to put up your, I guess we'll say it, your bullshit meter, and kind of who you want is the person who is going to get you, who you feel is truly excited about your book, who takes the time to ask you, not just with this book, but for your entire writing career, where do you see yourself going? What do you want to accomplish? You want your agent to have a shared vision with you in terms of your book and how you want to publish your book, and how you want to be perceived as an author. So really, you want somebody who's going to be you feel will be in your corner, who gets you, who is passionate, very passionate about the subject matter. So I would say to people, a lot of people I think are sort of, it takes a long time to break through that, yes, I want to see your chapters. And then I think people are sometimes a little bit too quick to, I have to take this person because, I got this initial. You don't. A good book is going to appeal to a lot of different people, and you really do want to be with somebody who understands your mission as a writer and is excited, because it is like a marriage. It is like a marriage, and that's how I would think about it.
Okay. So, what's the best way to get an agent's attention if you're really interested in one particular one?
Yeah, I work with and I see a lot of writers and their query letters, and I would say the number one thing is right up at the top of the query letter, figure out what your book, the most marketable detail is about either you or your book. And that's got to be up at the top. It's got to be the first line that they see. And I would make sure that that's up there because, people are going to look at the first couple of lines. So really hone in on that. And if it's that you've been writing book reviews, that's a great thing. That say you have a quote from a fellow author, that's a best-selling author, put that at the top. Say your book has a very marketable angle, put that right at the top. If the book is based on a personal story, put that at the top because that shows a real authenticity that a lot of other projects, won't have that advantage of. So I would make sure to put that, right there at the top so that you can quickly get their attention.
That's really interesting, and that is not necessarily the standard advice you get when you're studying how to write a query letter. So
yeah,
that
I think a lot of that is sort of there's a lot of sort of form, as I've seen a lot of sort of ideas about the form of a query letter, and kind of like, oh, I've been following you, or oh, I saw you publish this. And who cares? Who cares? That's like me going in for an interview with a publisher and saying, oh, I like to read, or that's me as an editor. That people would always laugh at sales conferences, the sales for everybody get a good kick when an editor gets up on the dais and says, I love this book. Of course you love this book because you're publishing this book. It's like, so put that to the side. You can always put that at the end of the letter or in the second paragraph or something. The top, your key selling point, your number one key selling point that's going to sell copies of your book. And define the marketplace, because that's, everybody's got too much paper coming across their desk and they've got like 2 seconds to decide on these things. So, you want to they're going to glaze over that first sentence anyways, saying, oh, I admired blah, blah that you did. So put that to the back and put your top quality right up in front. That's what we do. And you're marketing yourself like you market a book. And if you're writing sales copy for a book, you put the key, points at the top. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Now I have my book. I'm assuming that before I send it to an agent, I would want it to be in the absolutely best possible shape.
Right.
So do you recommend that I should hire an outside editor before I send this thing out?
Right. Now this is, I get a lot of questions about this, and I've had a lot of people say, I think I need to hire a developmental editor, I need to hire a copy editor, I need to hire a proofreader. And these are all 3 different types of editing. And the fact is, first, a lot of people should definitely be giving their manuscript, before even thinking about hiring any editors, giving their manuscript to some beta readers, some people who are willing to take a look, for free or in exchange for a meal or a reading of their own manuscript or a bottle of wine or whatever it is. Get some general feedback from, a group of people that you trust. And based on that, get your manuscript into the best shape you can possibly get it into. If you find that you are still struggling with that, then I would definitely look into taking on the services of a developmental editor. And there are a lot of places you can look for those types of people. Beyond that, though, in terms of copy editing and proofreading, I would not invest in those, because those are things that once your book gets picked up in-house, the publisher will do those things. And honestly, while you want to deliver a well-crafted manuscript and, you don't want it riddled with typos and grammatical errors and stuff like that, the real thing that agents and ultimately editors are going to be looking for is what the book is, the story, and the quality of the writing and the voice. And when I say the quality of the writing, I'm not saying you have to have every I dotted and T crossed. I'm saying it's like, because the editor knows they're going to work with this person and shaping the book. So is there something there that they feel they can publish, i.e. market? So you really want to focus on voice and story and marketability, and then make sure that all the writing is as really as good and great as you can make it. But you don't need to go the step of like copy edit or proofreading, kind of fretting about.
Okay.
It's supposed to be a dash or a comma or whatnot.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Do you ever, if you get a manuscript in that you really like, but you can see it needs shaping, do you ever recommend specific editors for writers to work with?
I do know some editors, and I will let them, I like for people, it's sort of like working with an editor is kind of like working with an agent. And even if the person is just doing developmental editing, you still want to make sure that they understand your book and what you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's some editors, I think, can overstep and start sort of changing voice too much. And that can be dangerous because I think a lot of authors are, they trust the editors and their experience, and then maybe too willing to say, oh, okay, I'll follow that. But then in the meantime, they're losing their voice. So you want to make sure that the editor you're working with is somebody who understands you, your book, and your voice, and is going to help you enhance that and not change that. But yes, I do. I have people that I've known in the industry for a long time. And there's also places like there's an online site called Reedsy, Reedsy, that a lot of gives a lot of great advice. There's a lot of good people on there. Editors, copy editors, proofreaders, cover designers, a lot of, sort of different walks of the publishing world where you can find people to help.
If you're writing, say, a literary novel or even an upmarket novel, what do you think about hiring an academic? Because a literary writer who's published some things that you love, and writes beautifully. What do you think about? Because I never see them, out there, but yet many of them are willing to take private clients. So
you mean academic editors?
Think they make good editors?
I think so. Yeah, I think they can. I think that I will say where I'm pausing, the question in the back of my head is academic books. And I'm talking very sort of professorial books.
No, I mean a literary writer who is perhaps teaching in a university program. He's teaching creative writing. Maybe he's teaching in an MFA program or a low-res program. But he's published, literary fiction or upmarket fiction, and you love it because it's so beautiful. Would it be a good idea to possibly reach out to somebody like that, even though they haven't hung out their shingle as an editor?
I don't think it can hurt, because even if they say no, then they might have some ideas for that individual where they could go to find people that are willing to. They might even have grad students that they teach that might be willing to do something like this, that they could say you recommend speaking to, because grad students can be could be a great resource for stuff like that too. Where I would worry a little bit about in terms of a grad student, or even anybody versus, say, an editor who's actually worked at a publishing house, would be for marketing or positioning advice. Because one of the hardest lessons actually for me, it was transitioning from my English and history background from William and Mary and my long education in writing certain types of writing about books in a certain type of way, and then being an assistant asked to write catalog copy and flap copy is a whole different kind of writing. And that marketing copy is very different speak than academic writing. So, and that is something that took quite a long time to learn how to hone. And it's funny, even, 20 something years later, ask any editor who's been in the business, even who's been in the business for a long, long time, they'll tell you writing that copy takes a very long time to write. It's really hard, to get that stuff perfect. So, yeah.
Well, the other thing, to consider is if you're hiring, I would think if you're hiring an independent editor who has experience at one of these big houses, you would hope that maybe, their name would mean something when you begin to query. If you can say this was edited by, John Doe.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah. And they may have some ideas of people you can approach as well, in terms of, agents that might fit. Because I know that is one sort of it's sort of kind of like when I was first looking for a job in publishing, publishing houses didn't come in court to my college for, new hires. There wasn't a book to go to say, here are the people that you should be, it's sort of a little bit of a secret. So, and I know agents, there's more out there, but it's still, I think it's hard for writers to kind of see the breadth of the agents and what they do. In which, sure. Publishers Marketplace is a great resource for authors, and they should be on there especially when they're starting to look for an agent. Seeing, to see the deals, it's a subscription, but I don't think it's all that much per month.
It's $25 a month. It's $25 a month, yeah.
So you don't have, I think you can pay per month, so maybe do it right when you're looking, and so you're not locked in for a year of this, but you want to see what deals are happening and who's selling what, who's actually able to place books, and what houses are buying, and how those books are pitched in the deal language. It's really worth checking out.
And also you can, if not all writers thank their agent in the acknowledgments. So if you read a book you'd like and you want to know who represents that author, you can search on Publishers Marketplace and find out who that author's agent is if you wanted to do that.
Absolutely.
Too. So,
absolutely. Yeah. It also will show foreign. It will show the foreign deals. So what kinds of books are selling to foreign publishers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are just 2 of you in your agency, but your list of books is impressive. It seems lots of intriguing nonfiction, and looks like a select list of literary fiction. Can you talk a little bit about these categories? So you have literary, you have upmarket, you have book club fiction, and there's women's fiction. Define all those for us.
I know they tend to get used interchangeably a lot, sort of, I guess, in the same way you have thriller, mystery, suspense. There's a little bit of, I guess, overlap, but I think really they're talking about sort of subtle shades, mostly about how the book is going to be published. So when you're talking about say an upmarket book, that is a book that is, one could also say, a review-driven book, where there is a strong concept that's easy to pitch, that is commercial, which makes it commercial, but the quality of the writing is you expect it to get great reviews. So that's what I would say is an upmarket or review-driven book. Then, say, literary fiction is a little different in that it can be, I guess one would call a little more writerly. It might be a little sort of quieter in terms of, it might not have the splashy, obvious hook. Some of them do, but it might not. But it's a book that the publisher hopes to generate reviews and award attention, because it's about the craft of the book. And usually that term gets applied also because sort of the background of the writer themselves as well. They're coming out of academia, maybe have some other writing credits at journals or literally, quarterlies, things like that. And then what did you say? Women's fiction tends to be commercial. And that can be sort of upmarket fiction to the more commercial, which is where I would say, upmarket review-driven fiction would be, say, a Melanie Benjamin, versus a, really commercial women's fiction would be more like The Devil Wears Prada. So, there's that. And then within that, you have all of these little subgenres of, romance and historical and, YA, middle grade, all of that sort of gets thrown in there as well.
Okay. So that sort of spot where literary, well, first I should ask this question. Is it possible to be both literary and commercial?
Yes. Yes. That convergence is really where we're talking about that upmarket book club, review-driven fiction. And that's where the book itself has something about it that is commercially compelling, the pitch, the pace, the voice, but it is also well written, and you would expect would generate really positive reviews and word of mouth. And book club fiction, you asked about that, and I didn't really speak about that. But book club fiction is a kind of fiction that you can see clearly appealing to book clubs, obviously, and usually that those things include books where there's, where it just raises a lot of discussion points. Sort of a famous example of that is The Memory Keeper's Daughter, where you, as a reader, are reading about an experience that causes you to kind of question, oh my God, wow, what would I do when faced with this choice? Or books that sort of point out what can happen to a woman in a certain period of time, like in a historical fiction. And you could compare sort of women and their role in society in the 1800s versus today. What's changed or what's not? Mm-hmm. And what would you do to navigate it? So a book that can generate, questions and discussion is going to be sort of pegged as a reading group book.
Okay.
But that book can also be literary or
upmarket
or even women's fiction.
Yeah. Okay.
Or nonfiction.
Right. Okay, well, now on your website, front and center, there's a big section about the international market. So let's talk about how you take a book into the international market, particularly fiction, and how is that done, and at what point is it done?
Well, foreign publishers like to see that there's a U.S. publication. So it is really done once there's a U.S. publisher secured. And it can be done either, right after the U.S. deal is made, or so before the book is published. For instance, some people like to try to place books. There's sort of two big book fairs. There is in the spring and April, the London Book Fair, which is a big rights book fair, international rights book fair. And I'm just talking for international adult fiction. There's the Bologna Book Fair, which is big for children's books, but for adult books. And then there's Frankfurt in October in Germany, which is a big international rights fair. And so the weeks before, right before, during, and right after are big for selling foreign rights. You have, if you're in a publishing house, you have a lot of foreign publishers coming to New York before going to those fairs to listen to what might be hot that people might be trying to sell at these fairs. So a lot of folks might try to place a book, say in March in advance of the London Book Fair at a U.S. publishing house, so that once the deal is made, it can show up at, in the publisher's marketplace or in PW and the deals and start generating a lot of interest. So when you get to the book fair, then you'll have this thing to talk about. But outside of that, it just happens a little bit more organically in that sometimes agents and authors hold on to the rights for their book, and the agent will then place the rights for the author. Sometimes the rights are sold to the publishing house, and then the publishing house sub-rights department will sell the foreign rights for the author. And whether the book is kept by the author at the agency or the publishing house represents the author, it usually gets played out during the initial deal for the book. Sometimes, a lot of times actually, if there's an auction for the book, it might be harder for an agent to hold on to those rights. Because publishers, they, once they are investing a lot of money, want to be able to have a lot of different outlets to recoup the advance that they may be assigning to the book. And that's one of those zealots. So,
okay. So
yeah.
if the so it can either be the agent on behalf of the author who is contacting these international publishers, or
Right.
it can be the U.S. publisher who got the right to contact the overseas publisher.
Yes, yes. And then there's a whole stratosphere of these folks called scouts that are people who follow what is being sent on submission. This is sort of a behind the scenes thing that if you were not on the if you weren't an agent or editor, you would have no idea about this whole little section here. But literary scouts are people who go to lunch all the time with agents and editors, and they are keeping their finger on the pulse of what agents are working on and are getting ready to send out to publishers, and what editors are working on or getting ready to publish. And they read things in advance or hear about them in advance, and will put together reports. And they usually work for groups of foreign publishers. So foreign publishers will retain them to report back to them on what they should be on top of, what they should be looking at. What's the word on the street in the U.S.? What's selling, what's hot,
Wow. Well, does it work the other way? Do we have spies over here in Europe looking to see what is going to be published in Europe that might be good in the U.S.?
I'm sure there are. Yeah. And a lot of, like when I was an editor, a big part of my job was constantly speaking with my colleagues at my sister companies or sister imprints to find out, what they were seeing. Were they seeing, what did you see that's of interest to you? And they might even be telling me about books that they didn't actually buy, but that they heard about or saw on submission, but that went somewhere else. So there's a lot of talk back and forth, about books.
Huh. Well,
international.
Wow, that's just fascinating. Okay.
It can take some time. Even if a book is a bestseller here, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be picked up abroad. A lot has to do with the subject matter. Some books that here that do incredibly well might just be deemed too American for a foreign audience. Like, for instance, a novel about the Civil War might not carry to Europe. It would have to be something extraordinary to kind of break through the idea of like, well, why do we care about the Civil War? Because that's so American.
Yeah.
There's also a difference in tone. Different countries are a little bit more open to things that are more sentimental, for example, than other countries. So sometimes, that can make a difference.
Well, sometimes I read a book that was published in the UK. Well, Wolf Hall, for example, that's a good example. And I look at that, and it's pretty. I mean, you got to work at it. Some of these books you really have to kind of work at. And I think, I wonder if that book if that book had tried to debut in the U.S., could it even have been published in the U.S.?
Interesting.
So.
Yeah.
And do you ever look at a book and think, maybe let's say it's medieval, a medieval historical novel about Boccaccio, since that's what I've just finished. Do you sometimes look at a book and think, well, I don't think that maybe would fly in the U.S., but in the European market, it might. Do you ever think that?
Well, but it's hard because they're going to want a U.S. I know they're going to want a U.S. publication, so it would be hard for me to take on in that case. Okay. I would encourage the author to see if they can't publish it there first. On their find an agent over there, and
like maybe in London.
Yeah,
for example.
And because there are also a lot of agents share. There are a lot of authors who have both a UK agent and an American agent. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And some agencies, I think, also have offices in London.
Yeah, they do. So.
Okay, well, so we have some pitches for you to comment on here. We don't want to forget those. We have 4 in total. So the first one is women's fiction, 85,000 words, entitled Vacation to Romance.
Mm-hmm.
On her dream European vacation, Stephanie has no interest in romance until a handsome British minister shows her what it means to be cherished. They continue their vacation in the States, but when Stephanie discovers her deceased husband was unfaithful, she must choose to trust again or protect her heart.
I'd say that for the most part, they've got the idea of it. There's a lot of good stuff here. They've got the idea of like needing to be provocative. There are a couple things that I would probably sort of zero in on. One is this whole no interest in romance. That wording is maybe a little off-putting. I would probably look at something more like something along the lines of being caught off guard or is surprised, as opposed to something as I've got no interest in romance, you know, because that's a little. And then about the but when Stephanie discovers her deceased husband was unfaithful, is kind of given away too much. I think I would take that out and something like, and discovers her, when her husband passes away, discovers there was a secret. Something about, so you're not giving away this whole thing that he was unfaithful. Let the reader discover whatever this thing is. Make it a little bit more, yeah. So, but this, she must choose to trust again or protect her heart is great. That's great. And the basic rhythm of it is good. I would just look at the wording in those two places.
Well, it seems to me, when I look at just blurbs for books, I mean, 95% of them have got a secret. I mean, that word just seems to be so hot, you know, a secret.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Okay. Well, great. That will be very helpful to that writer. Yeah. Okay, so this is adult fiction. Archivist Penelope Tempo's work at a failing museum gets complicated when film star Henry MacArthur wants to use her for research. But the real insanity begins when Penelope discovers she's a time traveler and must save Queen Victoria from assassination. Can she stop the world's timeline from falling into chaos?
That sounds interesting. I'm looking at it as well here on my screen. I think that I might see, I think it's also solid, except I think I might see, so the selling point here is going to be time travel and Queen Victoria. I might see if I couldn't flip-flop, somehow get that part into the first sentence. Certainly, archivist, it can be up front, that's fine. But I would try to move up that part about the time travel and Queen Victoria.
Okay.
Those are the more commercial points.
Okay. What about the kind of vagueness of the fact that he wants to use her for research?
Yeah, that is a little strange. I would agree with that. I think that's a little unclear and maybe more confusing. And I think that I would leave it to sort of being approached by a film star as opposed to used for research. When a famous film star approaches Penelope with a proposition or something like that, you know,
okay,
as opposed to used for research. It sounds a little clunky.
Okay. Okay, next we have a YA historical, Witch of the Wild Beast, set in 1854 in Philadelphia's penitentiary, is in the vein of Kong's A Beautiful Poison. When crazed Dr. Dowdrick kills Evelina's brother and her animals attack him, she's imprisoned for witchcraft. With her beasts and her love, Birdie, she uncovers Dowdrick's medical crimes.
Again, I think that it's basic. Again, each of these folks are definitely getting the idea of how these should sort of the pace, the length, I think I might. First, I would make sure that I would be careful. I would be careful of using a comparison in my pitch,
Okay.
right up front like that. Only because I think it's not a bad idea to use comparisons, but they can really backfire easily. First of all, if you use a comparison that is too big, people are just going to dismiss and think that this author has unrealistic expectations, and that sort of makes you start to wonder
Delusions
about
of grandeur.
Exactly. Then if you're using a comparison that isn't big enough, then that shows there's no marketplace for the book. So I'd be very, very careful with comparisons. I would probably take anything like that out of a pitch and leave it for further into the letter, but make sure that it's a book that has done very well, but not too well. So that's the one thing really with this. I think that when Crazed Dr. Dowdrick, I'm not really sure what his connection is. It's a penitentiary, but then there's this doctor. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure what the role of the doctor is kind of here. And I think those are the main things, is sort of.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I would focus on there. I would focus on those two, really. I'm just looking to see if there was a way to switch sort of the part with the animals with the beginning part and the time period. Sort of about her and her special relationship with her animals when they're threatened. She finds herself imprisoned in Philadelphia's notorious penitentiary, kind of thing.
Okay.
I would see if there was a way to kind of emphasize the magic of the relationship with the animals, because it sounds like there's something here, or there's something there about that.
Mm-hmm.
I could be off, but that would be a good selling point if there is.
Okay. Okay.
In YA, sort of like you've got that in like the Golden Compass. You've got that sort of special relationship between Lyra and those. I'm spacing on the name of what they're called now, but they're animals that are there,
Mm-hmm.
And in Harry Potter, for instance. So that connection between the character and their animals is a good one for that audience for this type of book. So I would maybe move that up. Yeah.
Okay.
Make the prison sound a little more dangerous and famous.
Okay. Okay, and the last one is upmarket women's fiction, 87,000 words, A River for Gemma. Intellectually disabled Gemma Porter is single, pregnant, and yearns to keep the baby she's not allowed to raise. But when the dark shadows of her grandmother's past threatens their lives, Gemma proves a mother's love knows no bounds. But will it be enough to reclaim her child?
I think this is a harder one because I'm looking at this phrase intellectually disabled. And I I think my issue with that is it's a little bit vague. I mean, you know what it means, but it's a little vague. So my question is, what more specifically with Gemma, what is her challenge?
Like autistic or
Right. Or what does she have trouble with? So I think it might be more interesting, instead of saying intellectually disabled, something more like Gemma Porter has always had trouble with blah, 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 or Gemma Porter struggles with autism. So, something that's a little bit more specific than intellectually disabled.
okay.
It sounds a little too much like dancing around whatever is going on with the character. And whatever's going on with the character here is clearly a major plot point of the book, because that's what she's confronting in the novel. So I think you don't want to hide that. I think you want to be really upfront about what that is. And it gives her personality, it gives her something appealing for the reader. And that would be my first with this. I think that in Yearns to Keep the Baby, she's not allowed to raise. This she's not allowed to raise is also a little bit vague. Yearns to Keep the Baby, that her mother has taken from her, or something a little bit more specific there as well. When the dark shadows of her grandmother's past threatens their lives, and that's fine, that's good. Gemma proves a mother's love knows no bounds, but will it be enough to reclaim her child? I think is good. I think that last part is good. I just think there's a little bit too much. There's a little bit too many vague things going on in the first sentence.
Okay.
Okay. That I work on a little bit.
Okay. Well, great.
Well, very solid. I mean, I'm impressed. Each of these writers have the understand the concept of the pitch and the pacing and the length, and that it's not supposed to be a summary, that it's supposed to be, a succinct, provocative 2 lines. So they're really good in that.
Well, and with your suggestions, they'll be even better. So great. So thank you.
I hope so.
So we've got about 4 minutes left. Any further advice or warnings that you'd like to give to aspiring authors?
Advice or warnings. I guess the main thing would be really make sure that to work on your manuscript before sending it out. Once a book has been read, I think a lot of also agents think this too, that they can approach multiple editors within the same house. Say one editor has passed on the book, they think that they can approach another editor. And the fact of the matter is, once one person has seen a book at an imprint, it's very hard to go back to that imprint. And it's also very hard to go back. Editors will say, yes, I'll read a revised manuscript, but they are already coming at it with this. You're already in a bit of an uphill battle there. And editors in-house all have their different niches of things they do. But at general trade houses, at the end of the day, the editors really are all wanting to publish books that'll end up on the New York Times list, for instance. So they're generalists. And I'm saying that because it means they tend to be generalists. So it might be a book that seems out of their track, but if it's something that they feel that they can really see an audience for and they could publish in a bigger way, they would be interested in it. So that's what I'm saying, that that's what I'm saying. It's sort of one submission to an imprint versus editor, editor, editor. That's why you want to be really, really careful and selective, making sure that everything is in, shines before sending it out. Because it's really, you really do have like sort of, once you go to the publishing houses, it's really one shot at each imprint.
Okay. And the same with agencies often. I mean, often they'll say a no from one is a no from all. On their websites, a lot of times they'll say that. Some of them say it's okay to query once you haven't heard from one, but others say, we discuss these, and a no from one of us is a no from all of us.
Yeah, a lot of places have sort of ed boards, whether it's an agency or a or a publishing house, and they'll discuss projects. Or, like in-house, for instance, you could have sent to an editor or an agent and they passed, and then you send to another agent or editor at the place, and then that new person gets excited about it, but then brings it up in front of other folks, and then you've got this person who says, but wait a minute, I saw that a year ago and I didn't think da-da-da. So now you've got this sort of pall that has come down on the thing. That's why I'm saying you want to be really careful.
Huh. Okay. Well, not to end on a sour note, a depressing note, but this has really been wonderful, wonderful information, and for the most part, extremely encouraging. And we thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure that as of today, around 600 people, and probably by the time this thing airs on the 25th, we'll be up around from 800 to 1,000. And I'm sure every one of those people just thanks you very much for your time today.
Thank you. That's fabulous. I'm hoping it's more upbeat but yet realistic. I think it's good to know what the challenges are so that you can attack them head on.
Exactly. All right.
There's stuff out there, but people are looking for books.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. That was great. Thank you so much.
Good. Okay. I hope it wasn't too downer.
No, just that last little bit. But like you say, realistic. You got to be realistic.
Yeah. I think people think you see as an editor, or you would see all of a sudden, you would have something you're excited about, and then you would find out that so and so saw it, 6 months ago or a year ago, and it then becomes really difficult because now you've got this sort of conflicting opinions in-house about something, and then people begin to kind of wonder and doubt its marketability, if one person turned it down. So, and even if that person is the person who usually does sports books, but somehow saw this thing and turned it down, now you've got an editor with experience saying, I don't really see it, it makes it hard.
Plus it kind of embarrasses the person who brought it forward.
Yeah, that's really bad. It's better to know. It's better to be told, oh, so-and-so saw this, didn't really see it for their list. So as an editor or an agent, you can come up with the speaking point to that, and not be blindsided by it. But that's what I'm saying. It's so important to get everything, to really make it perfect and shine, and not just kind of say, okay, well, I did as best as I could, and now I'm going to kind of throw it against the wall. That's not doing right by the author, who should just be who should be encouraged. If it needs to be better, then the agent has a responsibility to push the author to make it better before they take it out. I mean that's what I would want from an agent. Yeah, absolutely. But you would be surprised as an editor. This was not unusual that I would get sent something, say a second book by an author who I had under this happened a lot of times, who I had under contract, and I would say, well, this just, I would have to have this difficult conversation about how it wasn't as good as the first book and didn't see a marketplace for it, but it was an author I wanted to continue with, and then the agent would say, yeah, I thought so too, or yeah, that was a book that I tried to place 4 years ago and I couldn't place, but I thought after the success of the first one, we could bring this one out, and that's where it always bummed me out that the agent didn't have that initial hard conversation with the author and say, look, like, we need to think about a different direction, or we need to, and it's surprising. A lot of well-known, really good agents I had that happen with. And, I think sometimes they're worried about having the tough conversations with their clients. So I think that is a real responsibility. It doesn't help anybody when you're just,
No.
And hopefully you have an editor in cases like that. Hopefully it is an editor who's, willing to say a little bit more than just no. Not all editors are. Some of them are just going to say no.
Right.
So, yeah.
But, an author, it's impossible for an author to be subjective about their work. And so, that's what your agent needs to be.
Right. Exactly. You don't want, you definitely don't want just a yes man, right? You
That's
definitely
right.
want somebody who's going to give you the truth, whether it's stuff you want to hear or not. But obviously be able to do it within context and explain, what's going on, and give some, ideas for solutions or a way to talk about it and figure out a new plan of attack. Because, the people that are just, yeah, it's great, or,
No. Well, I have enjoyed talking to you so much, to the extent that I'm afraid to just, tell you that at some point I'm going to query you with my novel.
Please do. It sounds great.
I just really enjoyed talking to you, and you just really seem to have it all together. So